Have you ever stood just outside a family event, watching your name disappear from everything, like you were never part of them to begin with? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And this isn't just recognition, it's a revenge story. Quiet, sharp, and earned. If you've ever been the one they left off the list, keep watching. I arrived 15 minutes early. Military habit. Even out of uniform, I still moved like I was on assignment. But this wasn't an op. This was my little brother's award ceremony at the Naval Academy, or at least that's what it was supposed to be. I walked up to the gate. The young petty officer standing guard glanced at my ID, tapped on his tablet, and then gave me a polite, professional frown. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the list." My breath didn't catch. My heart didn't race. But my stomach dropped. Just a little. "Could you check again? Sophia Monroe." He flipped the screen around. There it was. Thomas Monroe. Helen Monroe. Cameron Monroe. That was it. No Sophia. No sister. Just silence. Deliberate, cold-blooded absence. I heard heels behind me, then a familiar voice. Cameron's. "It's fine," he said to the guard, flashing his award-winner smile. "Just a paperwork mix-up. She probably tagged along from D.C. She's admin staff." He turned to the tall woman at his side, his fiancée, Claire, I think her name was, and whispered just loud enough, "She should have married a real officer." Everyone laughed. I didn't. Not because it wasn't funny, but because I'd heard worse, said quieter, for years. My mom adjusted her sunglasses like she couldn't see me. My father offered a tight, awkward nod and said nothing. They walked right past me. Nobody vouched. Nobody stopped. And so I stood there, in a tailored navy blue suit, watching the people who raised me act like I was a stranger at my own brother's ceremony. My heels sank slightly into the gravel, like the ground itself didn't want to hold me up. The petty officer shifted. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." I nodded once. No protest, no scene. But inside, something cracked. They thought I was nothing. A desk, a spreadsheet, a nobody. But what they didn't know was I hadn't come for his ceremony. I had come for mine. The first time I realized I didn't belong in my own family, I was 13. Cameron had just gotten accepted into the Navy Youth Prep Program. Nothing official, just some summer camp with buzzwords and buzz cuts. Dad came home grinning, like he'd just been handed his own promotion. He printed out banners. Mom ordered sheet cake. I remember standing at the edge of the backyard barbecue, holding a paper plate and wondering if anyone even noticed I wasn't smiling. That same week, I'd won first place at the state science fair for an encryption model I built from scratch. I brought the medal home, heart pounding, thinking, just maybe, they'd be proud. Dad didn't even lower his newspaper. "Good job, sweetie," he muttered and turned the page. If you've ever had a moment like that, where you did something incredible but it barely registered because it wasn't what they cared about, tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. See, in the Monroe household, there was only one definition of service that counted: boots on the ground. Anything else, analysis, strategy, cyber ops, was support, aka forgettable. When Cameron got into the academy, they framed his acceptance letter. When I graduated top of my class from Naval Intelligence School, they didn't even show up. The message was clear. He was the legacy. I was the footnote. I used to tell myself it didn't matter, that recognition wasn't the point, that my work was behind the scenes for a reason. But truth is, I craved one moment, just one moment where my parents would look at me, Misa, really see me, Messi, and think, damn, that's our daughter. Instead, I spent holidays dodging comments like, "So, still doing that computer stuff, eh? Must be nice to have air conditioning in your war. Do you even wear a uniform anymore?" The worst part? I said nothing. I let it slide. Because that's what good daughters do, right? But something shifted at that gate when Cameron looked at me like I didn't even earn the right to exist next to his medals. That's when the years of quiet hit me like a brick wall, and I knew. The next time they saw me in uniform, they wouldn't be able to ignore it, because it wouldn't be over dinner. It would be on stage. 2 days after the gate incident, I was called to the Pentagon. Not unusual. My job has always been classified, fluid, mostly thankless. I was used to quiet hallways, coded messages, and missions that never made headlines. But that morning felt different. My clearance got me through 5 checkpoints in record time. When I reached the steel door with the retinal scanner, it opened before I even blinked. Inside was General Miller, 4 stars, full uniform, steel gray gaze that made the air freeze. He didn't waste time. "Sit down, Admiral Monroe," he said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "We're declassifying Operation Halcyon." My fingers hesitated over the folder. That mission had been the hardest thing I'd ever commanded. A hijacked oil tanker off the Red Sea coast, 16 civilian engineers held at gunpoint, and a SEAL team minutes from a trap they didn't see coming. I'd been the voice in their earpiece, the one who told them not to breach, the one who saw the second boat on satellite and said, "Abort." If I hadn't, "You saved their lives," General Miller said, voice like a gavel. "But more importantly, you averted a regional escalation that could have cost thousands." I nodded, slowly. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, solid, the way it gets before a storm. He poured 2 cups of coffee, dark black military style, and pushed one toward me. Then he leaned back. "I understand your brother's ceremony is this weekend." My eyes lifted. "I do," I said. Miller smirked. "Thought so. I remember the Monroe name. Your father served under my command in Bahrain. Good man. Proud. A little narrow." That was putting it mildly. He opened another folder, a slimmer one. Inside was the official order, authorization to declassify, full citation of commendation, live announcement scheduled. I stared at it. "You want to announce this? When?" "At the same event," he said. "Publicly. No more shadows, Admiral. The people you saved deserve to know your name." There was a long pause. Then I looked up. "Do I get to choose what I wear?" He smiled. 2 stars. Full dress. Bring the silence with you." I left that meeting not with butterflies, but with something sharper. Purpose, precision. They had spent years erasing me in private. Now they were about to watch me be revealed, in public. And this time, they wouldn't be able to look away. The sun was blinding that morning, the kind of sharp, cloudless heat that made your skin sting, even in full dress whites. I parked 3 blocks from the academy, not because I had to, I had priority clearance, but because I needed those last few minutes alone. The click of my heels against the sidewalk was the only sound I trusted. Everything else, the crowd, the press, the families, Bani, blurred into static. When I reached the main gate, the same petty officer from before looked up. His expression shifted instantly. Recognition, then panic. "Ma'am, I—" But before he could finish, the crowd stirred behind me. A black SUV rolled up to the curb with no markings, just tinted windows and that low, unmistakable hum of government-grade armor. The back door opened. General Miller stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't scan the area. He just adjusted his white gloves, met my eyes, and said, loud enough for everyone near the gate to hear, "There you are, Admiral Monroe. We were about to send a search party." Everything stopped. The petty officer's face drained of color. He straightened so fast his hat nearly flew off. The gate opened with a screech like it was scared to stay shut, and beyond the gate, I saw them. My parents, standing with Cameron and Claire halfway down the stone walkway. Their faces froze. Mom's sunglasses dropped just enough to see her eyes. Dad went stiff. Cameron blinked twice, like he couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. General Miller offered his arm. I took it without hesitation. As we passed through the gate, he leaned in just enough to speak without being heard by the press, but loud enough for my family, standing only feet away. "Would you like me to say something to them?" I didn't break stride, didn't glance over. "No," I said. "I have a feeling they're about to learn on their own." We kept walking, slow and steady, past every stunned face, every whisper, every camera now slowly turning our way. They used to say I was invisible. Today, they'd choke on it. Not because I needed revenge, but because the truth was finally walking beside me. The ceremony began just as the wind shifted, kicking up dust and anticipation in equal measure. Navy brass glinted under the sun. Rows of chairs lined the courtyard like ranks of silent witnesses. Cameron sat in the front row, flanked by our parents and Claire, his fiancée, every one of them still trying to process what they saw at the gate just minutes before. I didn't sit with them. General Miller had assigned me a seat near the front, 2 rows behind the press, directly facing the stage. Every once in a while, someone would glance back at me, uncertain whether to nod, salute, or stare. I didn't return any looks. I just waited. They called Cameron up first. He walked like a man who'd never had to second-guess his place. Confident, polished, picture-perfect in his dress whites. He took the stage to polite applause, then leaned into the microphone. "I want to thank my parents," he said, his voice strong. "They've supported me through everything. And Claire for being my anchor. And to my commanding officers, thank you for this honor." Not a word about me. Not even a glance in my direction. The erasure was intentional. Precise, familiar, but that's what made what happened next so satisfying. General Miller stood, the courtyard hushed. He adjusted his lapel mic, then looked out over the crowd, but not at Cameron, at me. "Before we close, we have an additional commendation," he said. "It wasn't scheduled, and for reasons of national security, it wasn't possible, until today." Chairs shifted, heads turned. The tension in the air went taut like a pulled cable. "Operation Halcyon," he said, "was a high-risk, zero-margin mission carried out off the Red Sea coast. A civilian tanker hijacked, 16 engineers at gunpoint, a SEAL team dispatched, and nearly ambushed, until one voice on the comms ordered them to stand down." He paused. That voice belonged to Rear Admiral Sophia Monroe. Silence. Then came the sound of dozens of chairs scraping back, not in protest, but in unison. The entire audience, row by row, stood. Officers, cadets, commanders, even visiting dignitaries. Everyone stood, except 3, my mother, my father, and Cameron. Their bodies remained still, like stone figures caught mid-thought. Cameron looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. I rose, walked up the stage. No flinch, no smile, just presence. General Miller pinned the Distinguished Service Medal to my uniform and leaned in close. "Time to tell your story, Admiral." Then in front of everyone he said it, the part that changed everything. It was Admiral Monroe's call that prevented an ambush targeting the USS Lexington. That destroyer carried 37 sailors, including 1 Lieutenant Cameron Monroe. I heard the sharp intake of breath from the front row. Cameron turned pale. Mom reached for Dad's hand but never looked away from me. The truth settled like gravity. They didn't just overlook me. They owed me, and they'd never even known. I turned toward the audience, accepted their salute, and let the roar of applause wash over me. Not because I needed it, but because I finally understood what it meant to be seen. And as I looked out, eyes scanning faces that once blurred past me, I found my brother. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply stared, stunned, as if he were finally realizing the weight of everything he had ignored. And maybe, just maybe, what it cost him. 6 months passed. The world went back to spinning, but something in my family had shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but like tectonic plates groaning beneath the surface. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the ceremony. No calls, no messages. Not because I was angry, not anymore. I just didn't need their voice to validate mine. The silence wasn't punishment. It was freedom. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got an email. Subject line, dinner? The sender, Helen Monroe. No body text, no emoji, just a time, a date, and an address I already knew by heart. I didn't respond. I just showed up. Their house looked the same, but felt different. There were no flags on the porch this time, no proud banners, no framed photos by the door, only a quiet calm that made me uneasy. Then I stepped inside, and and saw it. Against the far wall, where the old grandfather clock used to stand, was a new glass display case. Elegant handcrafted cherry wood. Inside were family relics. My grandfather's flag from Vietnam, Cameron's commendation plaque, my father's retirement coin, and in the very center, positioned at eye level, my Distinguished Service Medal. Next to it, a framed photo of General Miller pinning it to my chest. My throat tightened, not from nostalgia, from recognition, from proof. Mom stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "He built it last month," she said gently. Said it was time the display told the whole story. I nodded once. No words. Not yet. Dinner was awkward in the way first reconciliations often are. No one bragged. No one compared. Dad didn't bring up Cameron's latest deployment. Mom didn't ask about my personal life. Instead, halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat and said, "Sophia, how do you manage interagency politics at that level? Must feel like herding sharks." It wasn't small talk. It was curiosity. It was the first real question he'd ever asked about my work. I gave him a real answer, and for the first time in my life, he listened all the way through. Later, out on the porch swing, Cameron sat beside me, elbows on his knees. The sky was dark and quiet, 1,000 stars blinking in no particular order. "I'm sorry," he said, not looking at me. "For everything." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "It was never about needing you to be proud of me, Cam. I just didn't want to be erased." He nodded slowly. "I guess I needed to feel like I was the hero." "You were," I said softly. "You just didn't realize I was too." There was a long pause. Then he asked, "So, what now?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. Now I'm heading up the Joint Command Evaluation Board, which means I'm in charge of approving all strategic level officer promotions. He blinked. "Including mine?" I raised an eyebrow. "Especially yours." He laughed, but it was the nervous kind, and I let it hang there, just long enough for him to sit with it. Because this wasn't revenge, it was balance, and I was finally holding the scale. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told you weren't enough, then found a way to prove you always were, I want to hear from you. Drop AI in the comments if you've ever had to reclaim your place. And if this story spoke to something you've lived, you're not alone. Subscribe for more true-hearted revenge stories about people who rise after being dismissed.